Okay. Just like to acknowledge my collaborators and partners again, the producers, the farmers that gave us their data. We have the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, Crawford, Erie, Sandusky, Seneca, and Wyandotte. We have the Sandusky River Watershed Coalition. We have the TIEAR, Texas Institute for Applied Environmental Research at Tarleton State University. This is Alice Group. We have Tom Green's group, the IPMI, and we have the USDA-ARS group, Kevin King's group. And of course, this project was funded by the Conservation Innovation Grant. And this was about 4 years ago. This was funded in 2013. When the CIG announcement was out, actually, it was looking for some projects that deals with soil health. So the first thing that came into my mind, actually, in formulating or in developing the proposal was ask the question, what is soil health anyway? How do we quantify soil health? So that was the underlying kind of question, actually, that helped us develop the project. And with that, we further made some 4 specific objectives. So we have the edge of field studies or field samplings, together with Kevin King and with the producers, where we're going to collect soil data, plant data, and all those things, actually, and relate them to the environmental effects of BMPs, as well as try to quantify soil health. And then we're going to try to use the APEX and SWAT modeling across the whole watershed of the Sandusky, but at the same time, use ALICE NTT at the field scale level. So we're trying to connect what's going on in the field and go up to the watershed. Because there's that basic question, actually, me as a farmer having a 50-acre or 100-acre farm, how do I affect the whole MOMI watershed of 4 million acres or 3 million acres of ag land? So that's the question, actually, that always comes out. Even for the Sandusky, how does a 50-acre farm or field affects the whole Sandusky watershed? And of course, we have some extension and outreach, information dissemination, and of course, this is one of those activities that we're doing. So this is the underlying chart or something that drives us. So we want to know what's going on with the soil, cropping systems, conservation practices, and put that as a demonstration farm and gather data, and at the same time, put that into the model. And then we have the observed data, and we have the model trying to connect to each other, trying to validate each other, and then we're going to try to talk with the producers, is this really happening in your farm? And then the producers is going to feed back to us to improve the model. So some of the field data that we have gathered, one is infiltration. We have been always talking, well, you know what, if you have good soil health, that will improve infiltration. If you have no-till, that will improve infiltration. But have you seen a data yet that proves that? This data actually shows us that if you have a no-till, there is a much higher initial infiltration compared with if you have a tilled land. So that shows actually that no-till improves infiltration. The question is, where does the water go through? Through the macropores or through the soil matrix? And that's another study. That's another question that we need to answer. Because in terms of environmental point of view, this might be bad, this might be good, but obviously from the productive sense, this is really good. And then we tried also to just look at the soil bulk density, and the tillage. And of course, this had been an established fact that if you have tilled land, you have a higher bulk density. We tried to compare rotational till and no-till, but it seems that there are some similarities between the two. One thing that we really need to be sure of, and I have to look at the data, because we need to know that if this is really a long-term no-till or just another rotational till. And that's one thing that we need to know. And soil organic matter, of course, this is also an established fact that you have a much higher organic matter at the 0 to 2 inch top layer of the soil compared with the lower layer of the soil. And again, the stratification data, this is just to add to the data that Laura presented earlier. We have soil stratification in the Sandusky. So the phosphorus actually is much higher at the 0 to 2 compared with at the lower 2 to 8 inches. This one answers the question, or probably is related to what Jeff asked earlier and discussed with Kevin. What we did was that instead of just looking at the available MELIC 3P, we asked ourselves, why don't we just also look at the total P that's in the soil? And this shows us actually the slope, which means that on the average, the available P actually is less than 10% of what's the total P in the soil. So about 9%. And that's at the 0 to 2 inches depth of the soil. So the question then again, is the rest 91% part of legacy P? Are these, what percent of that is going to be released later on as available P? We don't know. And that shows us actually that there's a lot of P in the soil, aside from the available P. Whether it is easily released or not, we don't know. And we also took samples from the 2 to 8, and the relationship is almost similar, although the values are lower. Still, about 8% of the available P, of the total P, is available P. And that's one thing that we really need to know, actually. What happens to that rest of the total P that's not available? Is it part of the legacy P? Is it part of that's really not available, or part of the attached that's not easily available, or how many years it takes for them to be available? So, as a summary, yeah, the available P, I'm gonna go up. Available P is less than 10% of the total soil P. And there is soil stratification. We have I'm not sure if I showed the organic matter, but the organic matter actually is about 2% across the soils that we have sampled, and there were some soils that are less than 1%. Wow, less than 1%, and some as high as 6%. And of course, there's a lower bark density in no-till, and again, higher infiltration in no-till versus tilled soil. So let's go to the SWOT modeling. I think some of you have seen this 3 years ago or 4 years ago. This just shows us actually that the red ones have much higher exports compared with the red ones. And if you look at the year, these were calculated at different years. And if you look, say for example, this one here changes from year to year and from place to place. What does that mean? That means actually that, well, just to back up a little, what we did actually was that we have a 4-year cropping system in this, or a 3-year cropping system, and each of these, actually, like for example, corn, soybean, wheat, or whatever crop rotation there is, and there is a different crop management or agricultural management for each of the crop. Like for example, I think the assumption here that we did was that for corn, it's almost always like 80% tilled, chisel plowed. For soybean and wheat, it's almost always 90% no-till and at the same time broadcast. So if you have a crop, for example, for a single year, for a single area, that means that if you have a crop rotation there, corn, soybean, wheat, your crop management there changes. You apply fertilizer differently from corn, soybean, and wheat. You apply different rates and all of these things actually. Plus the variation between the years. Some years are wet, some years are dry. And that goes actually to the, if you go further, just look at this one part here. So at this part, and in 2008, it has less exports. 2009, I'm sorry, this one is one of the highest exports. This one is less, went up a little bit in 2010, and went higher in 2011. So it changes. The exports from area to area, from a field to field changes, depending on the crop rotation, depending on your management, depending on the weather. The same thing with sediment yield. So what am I trying to reach at? When I say critical areas, these are what we call the acute sources. So it changes with time and space. And the question is, if you are looking at critical source areas, it changes with time and space. How can you target it? And that goes with the question that targeting may not be really effective. And what I think is that instead of having a structural implementation of BMPs, the best thing to implement watershed-wide is something that is cultural. And I'm going to go back later to that. So the nutrient tracking tool, I'm not going to discuss more about what is NTT, but I'm going to go to the results yet. This is compared with the actual edge of field data. And in terms of corn, so we compared it with two fields, soybeans and wheat. That's the very first thing that we compare the model, the NTT. Is the crop yield acceptable? Is the crop yield comparable to what we're getting in the field? And it seems pretty good. For corn, it kinds of overestimate. For wheat, it kinds of underestimate. Soybeans is pretty okay. Now, this is for the actual exports of the nutrients. Note that in our simulation with NTT, we are doing it for 30 years. And for the observed data, we only have 1 year of data. So there's a big difference there. Why 30 years? Because we want to take account of the variability, uncertainties between the years with respect to the to weather. So in terms of total P exports, this includes the tile exports and the surface runoff exports. So between the two fields, I think the model is doing pretty okay. And then for the total N, the field one is okay. The second field is just about almost 50%. So there's some uncertainties there. But with this, can we say that NTT is applicable to Northwest Ohio with this data, with this calibration? For myself, as a modeler, I think I'm pretty confident with this data. What about dissolved P coming off from the tiles? For both fields, we have almost the same, 0.19 for the observed field 1 and field 2, and we have 0.22 for the NTT simulations. For the total N, for the other field, we're doing pretty okay, and of course, the other field was just kind of, there's just so much uncertainty, and we don't know. Probably if we have more data, probably 3 years of data, or 4 years of data, we're gonna be closer. So, again, as what Ali has discussed, NTT is a web-based, it's user-friendly, but I tell you, the learning curve is quite steep. It's user-friendly, but you have to learn it. So, and we use the soil test, actual bulk density data for this. And it can calculate the nutrient and sediment exports. For the extension, we have field days. This is one part of our extension information dissemination. And we're actually trying to make a manual and some kind of a fact sheet about NTT. Yeah, a user manual about NTT later on. So next steps ongoing, we will continue to verify the NTT with as many edge of field studies data that we have, that we can get. We will compare the organic matter versus bulk density versus infiltration. And right now, we have a pilot study in Erie and Huron County about the pay for performance program using the NTT. So we are trying to entice the farmers to use a certain BMP, but it's according to their performance. We're going to pay them if there's some kind of, data to show using NTT that if they do this BMP, they're going to reduce not just nitrogen, not just phosphorus, but also sediments, or total P, or DRP. My take home, I think I've discussed this a couple of weeks ago in the Lake Erie Millennium Network meeting. So how do we reduce the 40% target goal from the IGC or from the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement? Again, there is a need for widespread BMP adoption, but each field is unique from each other. We've shown that, we've discussed that for the last 3 or 4 talks earlier. Each field is unique from each other. And I would say the actual implementation of the BMPs the devil is in the details. How do we implement now the BMPs? By taking that is that we have to do it field by field basis. Each farm, each field is unique from each other. For example, for the same farmer, an adjacent field might be different from each other. So we cannot just have a blanket, one BMP or 2 suites of BMPs applied across the watershed. We need to know field by field what's the best for that field. And I believe, actually, we can show, actually, that NTT is a potential tool to do that. And that's all I have. Comments, suggestions, questions? We're all ready for break?